Our lives are like a train journey. Year after year, events, people, and cities rush past the window. Some ride comfortably in air-conditioned compartments, others squeeze into side berths near the restroom, and some even cling to the roof of the car. It might seem like your spot on this train reflects your effort, talent, or determination, but that's not the whole story. It all comes down to the ticket you were handed, and you didn't get to pick it. That first crucial lottery in your life, your citizenship is the lottery, and your passport is the ticket. Even a mummy who died 3,000 years ago could get this tiny document, while millions of living people today can't claim a single one. Today, we'll explore how one lone spy and a world war forever changed the rules of travel. We'll uncover why your passport is a contract with the state, one you never signed. And we'll discover what truly gives it power. Not democracy, not security, but something far simpler. The big question is, why are some tickets in this global lottery winners from the start, while others are not? Even the color of a passport isn't random. It carries a whole cultural code. Bright red often traces back to a communist legacy like in Russia, China, or Mongolia. But if you see a deep burgundy shade like red wine, you're probably looking at a citizen of the European Union. Green stands out as a crucial color for Islam, symbolizing nature and life. You'll find it on passports from Morocco, Pakistan, or Saudi Arabia. Blue represents the New World, a sign of fresh beginnings. Former colonies and younger nations from the United States to Brazil often use this color. Sometimes colors shift over time. Take the United Kingdom, for example. After parting ways with the European Union, it swapped its burgundy passport for the old imperial blue. Then there's the rarest color of all, black. It signals practicality like New Zealand's passport, a simple booklet stamped with a coat of arms. Yet this same booklet could have been issued to someone who died 3,000 years ago. While millions of people today have no official documents at all, how is that even possible? This isn't a joke or some internet hoax. Back in the 1970s, they really had to transport the mummy of Ramses II from Egypt to France for restoration. But French law says that everyone crossing the border, alive or dead, needs a passport. And the bureaucracy didn't skip a beat. They issued a brand new Egyptian passport to a pharaoh who died 3,000 years earlier, complete with a photo. Now, place that absurd fact next to another one. How many people do you think live today without passports? 1,000? 10,000? In reality, 4.5 million. That's the population of a small European country. Invisible people, stateless. They even created a special document for them, a world citizen passport. A noble idea, but in practice, hardly anyone accepts it. So it turns out a dead pharaoh holds more rights to cross borders than millions of living people. How did we let the world get this way? We tend to think of passports, visas, and border guards as permanent fixtures, like the changing seasons. But that's an illusion. There was a time when the world existed almost without borders. In the late 19th century, you could travel halfway around the globe without once showing a document. You could board a train in Paris and step off in St. Petersburg just by buying a ticket. You could cross the Atlantic on a steamship and set foot in New York without a single question. It was the golden age of travel, and Jules Verne's heroes who circled the world in 80 days didn't seem so far-fetched. So, what created this freedom? High ideals of humanism? The Declaration of Human Rights? No, it all came down to one invention: the steam engine. Trains and steamships shrank the world. Millions rushed into other countries chasing work. The old passport systems, relics of the medieval era, only got in the way of this massive flow of labor. So they simply disappeared. Freedom of movement turned out to be a side effect of the Industrial Revolution. This world without borders ended suddenly and violently. In 1914, Europe and America brought back passports. The reason was clear: the First World War. They needed to stop two things: citizens leaving who could be drafted, and outsiders entering who might be spies. But the earliest passports were laughably unreliable. They didn't even have photographs, just a written description of the owner. Height, average, hair, dark, distinguishing features, mustache. Thousands of people fit that description, and that loophole was exploited immediately. In the fall of 1914, a man carrying an American passport named Charles Inglis arrived in Britain, but he was actually a German naval officer and spy named Hans Lodi. He had managed to obtain the identity of a real American whose appearance he slightly resembled. Lodi's mission was to report the movements of the British fleet back to Berlin. However, his coded messages were amateurish. Authorities quickly uncovered his cover and executed him in the Tower of London. He became one of the first spies executed in Britain in the 20th century. Yet, his brief and failed career triggered a major change. Bureaucrats learned a harsh lesson. You can't trust verbal descriptions alone. Just weeks after Lodi's execution, British passports made, including a photograph, mandatory. Other countries followed suit immediately. What began as a temporary wartime measure stuck. After the First World War, passports became a permanent part of our world. There was one corner of the world where history took a completely different, paradoxical turn. This was Soviet Russia. Right after the revolution, the Bolsheviks declared passports a relic of the Tsarist regime, a tool of control, and abolished them entirely. Instead, the main form of identification became the work record book, a document that still exists today. It proved you weren't idle but a productive member of society. But what if you were a so-called former, a noble, a merchant, an intellectual? Then you received a work record book for the non-working class. Its official name was the Temporary Labor Certificate for the Bourgeoisie. Some of these booklets even bore a mocking inscription on the cover, "He who does not work, neither shall he eat." When the poet Vladimir Mayakovsky wrote his famous lines, "I pull from the wide trousers a duplicate of priceless cargo," he was referring to the Soviet foreign passport. And here's the strange part. The Soviet Union issued foreign passports before it issued internal ones. The government reintroduced internal passports only in 1932 to control city populations during famine and rapid industrialization. But they didn't hand them out to everyone. Former prisoners, wealthy peasants known as kulaks, priests, and those labeled unreliable were denied passports. Without one, they had to leave the city within 10 days. Yet this wasn't the main issue. The vast majority of peasants didn't have passports at all. Tens of millions lived without any official documents, which meant they couldn't legally leave their collective farms. In effect, they were tied to the land like serfs of old. The full rollout of passports took decades and didn't finish until 1981. Think about that. The last peasant bound to the land in Russia vanished 2 decades after Yuri Gagarin's historic spaceflight. So, what exactly is a passport? Is it just a document for crossing borders? Not really. It's more like a marriage certificate, a marriage to your own country, with all the rights that come with it, and more importantly, the responsibilities. And breaking this marriage can cost you $500 million. A passport is like a marriage certificate with your own country. And just like any marriage, it comes bundled with a set of rights and responsibilities. You never signed this contract. It's handed to you at birth. But make no mistake, its terms are very real. Let's take a closer look at this agreement. What does the rights section say? At the very foundation, the right to live in the country, to work legally, to vote for politicians, and even to run for office yourself. Now, what about the responsibilities section? That's where it gets more interesting. Obeying the laws, serving in the military, and of course, paying taxes. At first glance, it looks like a standard list. But sometimes these contracts hide clauses printed in fine print. Take Latin America, for example. Almost every country there requires you to vote. It's not a right, it's a duty. Skip the polls and you break the contract. That comes with real consequences. In Australia, you'll just get fined. In Brazil, they might stop issuing you loans. And in Belgium, repeated absenteeism can strip you of your voting rights for a full decade. Still, all of this pales compared to the most fundamental duty every citizen faces: paying taxes. Most countries follow a simple rule. If you live and work here, you pay taxes here. If you move to another country for work, you pay taxes there. It's logical, fair, and easy to understand. But 2 countries think your marriage contract with them lasts for life and applies everywhere. They collect taxes from their citizens on any income, no matter where in the world they are. One is the small African nation of Eritrea. The other is the United States of America. It doesn't matter if you live in Moscow, Tokyo, or a deserted island. If you hold an American passport, you have to file tax reports with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service every single year. How serious is this? Just ask Al Capone. Al Capone stands as perhaps the most infamous gangster in history. Authorities couldn't convict him for bootlegging, extortion, or even murder. Simply put, there wasn't enough evidence. So, how did he finally fall? Taxes? Federal agents showed that his lavish lifestyle didn't match his reported income. The verdict? 11 years behind bars. It was the government's way of saying, we can't prove you're a killer, but we know you skipped paying your fair share. And that reasoning still holds today. If you're a wealthy individual with assets around $2 million, renouncing your American citizenship will trigger a tax bill. It's called the exit tax, a fee for walking away. Essentially, you pay for the privilege of ending the relationship. Sometimes, the cost of this kind of scheme reaches astronomical levels. Oleg Tinkov, a businessman labeled as a foreign agent in Russia, tried to cheat when renouncing his American citizenship. He undervalued his assets by over 3,000 times. The United States tax authorities did not let that slide. The exit tax, combined with penalties, cost him a record $500 million. $500 million. Just for giving up his passport. But what happens when someone holds not one, but two passports? Does that double their obligations? It actually depends on whether they have dual citizenship or a second citizenship. They might sound the same, but the difference is crucial. It's like the difference between a phone and its SIM cards. Let's imagine Alex. Besides his American passport, Alex also holds an Israeli one. For him, it's like having two different SIM cards in the same phone. Each country sees him as its own customer and ignores the other. Neither really cares about the other passport. Each treats Alex strictly as their own citizen. This is what we call dual citizenship. Alex was born, educated, and served in the United States. But then he moved to Israel, where he was surprised to find out he was considered liable for military service again. From Israel's perspective, his time in the American military belongs to a completely different network provider. Now, let's imagine Alex. Alongside his Russian passport, Alex also holds a passport from Tajikistan. Tajikistan is the only country that has a special agreement with Russia for roaming. The two countries agreed to share Alex's rights and responsibilities. This is effectively dual citizenship. Alex attended school in Tajikistan, graduated from university there, and even served in the army. Later, he moved to Russia, and he no longer needs to serve in the Russian military. Russia recognizes his military service from its partner and counts it toward his obligations. The difference lies in whether countries acknowledge each other's commitments or simply ignore them. So we've sorted out the responsibilities. But why do some contracts open doors to nearly the whole world, while others keep you locked in? Could it be about democracy and human rights? The answer will probably disappoint you. Measuring the strength of a passport is simpler than you might think. There's just one key criterion. Where can you travel without a visa? The more countries that let you in just by seeing your passport cover, the higher it ranks globally. Look at these rankings and the pattern feels familiar. At the top, you'll almost always find the same names: Japan, Singapore, and countries from Europe and North America. At the bottom, you'll see nations from the Middle East and Africa. Let's start the investigation. What do all leaders have in common? The first and most obvious theory is security. It makes sense. The fewer explosions, ethnic conflicts, and crimes in a country, the more the world trusts it. No one wants refugees slipping in disguised as tourists. This theory holds some truth. There's a clear link between stability and the strength of a passport. But here's the paradox. Inflatable boats carrying migrants across the Mediterranean head in only one direction, toward Europe. Citizens from safe countries can go anywhere they want, yet they choose not to. Meanwhile, people from unstable nations desperately want to leave but can't. So it's not just about safety. Maybe it's about democracy? Developed countries respect human rights, hold fair elections, and protect freedom of speech. Other nations probably see this as a sign of reliability and gladly waive visa requirements. It sounds convincing, but the connection isn't clear. In the global democracy rankings, Singapore sits at number 70, and the United Arab Emirates ranks 125th. Yet their passports rank among the top 20 strongest worldwide, outpacing many European democracies. Democracy isn't the key. So, what's the real secret? All leading countries share one crucial factor, and it's the most important driver of visa-free travel: wealth. It's surprisingly simple. The power of a passport directly reflects a country's economic output per person. The richer your fellow citizens are, the less likely it is that, as a tourist, you'll overstay and work illegally. You don't threaten the local job market. Instead, you become a welcome visitor who brings money and spends it on hotels, restaurants, and shops. Money is the universal key that unlocks borders. And even though nearly every country has roughly doubled the number of visa-free destinations over the past 15 years, the gap between rich and poor nations remains wide. But this wealth has a hidden, invisible side. Take the United Arab Emirates or Qatar, countries boasting some of the strongest passports in the region. How many residents do you think actually hold citizenship? 80%? 99%? In reality, only 12% do. Just 12%. The other 88% are expatriates. Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram who gained citizenship in the United Arab Emirates, is one of them. But most are not tech millionaires. They are hundreds of thousands of Indians, Pakistanis, and Kenyans, building skyscrapers, cooking in kitchens, and cleaning the streets. They drive the economy, but they have almost no rights. Most of them hold residency permits tied to a specific employer, who often takes their passports, claiming to keep them safe. This turns workers into the company's property. 14-hour workdays under 50-degree heat. Want to quit or switch jobs? Forget it. Your passport stays locked in the boss's safe. You're trapped in a system that built this wealth but refuses to see you as a person. The shine of Dubai and Doha is paid for by the labor of people whose own passports hold almost no value. So, we're born with a passport passed down from our parents. Or are we? It turns out there are two fundamentally different principles that split the world in half. Which side of that line you're born on changes everything. So, what are the two principles that split the world in half? Imagine citizenship as a kind of inheritance. Most countries, including Russia, follow the principle known as right of blood. In Latin, it's called jus sanguinis. A child inherits their parents' passport like a family heirloom. It doesn't matter where the child is born, whether on a plane over the Pacific Ocean or during an Antarctic expedition. If the parents are citizens, so is the child. This logic has held true for thousands of years. Then Europeans discovered the New World and established colonies. Settlers, convicts, adventurers, they all mixed together. Tracking who descended from whom became nearly impossible. That's when a new principle emerged, the right of the soil, or jus soli. Simply put, where you're born is where you belong. Anyone born on the land of the United States, Canada, or Argentina automatically gains citizenship, even if their parents are just tourists. This is why so-called birth tourism thrives in these countries. Expectant mothers fly halfway across the globe so their child can secure that coveted passport. These children are sometimes called anchor babies because they serve as an anchor dropped on the shore of a new country, paving the way for their whole family to settle there later. But there's one country where you can't inherit citizenship by blood, nor claim it by birthright, simply because there are no maternity wards and birth rates are practically zero. That country is the Vatican. You can't become a citizen of this tiny state just by being born there. The only way to get its passport is to serve the Holy See. You have to become a cardinal, a diplomat, a Swiss guard, or even the Pope himself. Here, citizenship isn't a right. It's more like a work uniform you hand back when you retire. So, what if you weren't born in the right country and have no plans to become the Pope? For most people around the world, there's only one option: naturalization. That means you go to the government and say, "I want to become one of you." And they hand you a long list of tasks and obstacles. You have to live in the country for a certain number of years, learn the language, pass a history exam, prove you have a job, and show you have no legal troubles. The timeline for this process varies everywhere. In Russia, the United Kingdom, or the United States, you need to live there for 5 years. In countries founded by migrants like Argentina or Peru, it's just 2 years. But in the United Arab Emirates, if you're not Arab, you have to live there for a full 30 years. 30 years, and that's not all. You must master Arabic perfectly and give up all other passports. An entire lifetime, just for one document. But there's another way, a faster one. For those with the money. It's called citizenship by investment, or as it's popularly known, the golden passport. That's right. You can simply buy citizenship, and it's completely legal. For some countries, selling passports forms the backbone of their economy. Take the small island nation of St. Kitts and Nevis, for example. This program accounts for a quarter of the entire country's economic output. The prices in this market resemble a car dealership. There are budget options. A passport from Vanuatu costs just $130,000. Then there's true luxury. Austria, for instance. Instead of waiting 10 years through the standard naturalization process, you can pay 10 million euros. One payment, and you become a citizen of the European Union. Put another way, living 30 years in the United Arab Emirates costs a fraction of a single day in an Austrian bank. But what if you don't have millions of euros and don't want to wait decades? There's another kind of lottery you can try. A genetic one. I'm talking about repatriation, which means literally returning to your ancestral homeland. The most famous example is Israel and its law of return. Anyone who can prove Jewish ancestry has the right to claim Israeli citizenship. To qualify, your documents must prove that you are Jewish, at least through your great-grandparents. In other words, if even one of your grandparents was Jewish, the doors are open to you. But why does it go back specifically 3 generations? Where does this exact cutoff come from? The answer lies in the shadow of one of the 20th century's darkest tragedies. This policy partly responded to the Nazis. The Nuremberg racial laws of the Third Reich defined Jews and persecuted people up to the 3rd generation. When Israel was founded, it mirrored this harsh logic. Those whom the Nazis marked for death deserve a new life in their ancestral homeland. Is it possible to become Jewish if you have no Jewish ancestry? Yes, there is a path called conversion. But this isn't just about declaring a faith, it means completely changing your identity. You must spend years studying Hebrew, history, and religion. Then you appear before a court of rabbis who decide if you're ready. For men, circumcision is mandatory. It's a challenging and lengthy journey, one that few complete. Returning to your ancestral homeland sounds like a happy ending to a long journey. But history tells of times when this return was forced, and the homeland greeted millions of former citizens not with open arms but with screening camps. Yes, history records cases where people were forced to return home. After the Second World War, millions of Soviet citizens remained scattered across Europe. Prisoners of war, forced laborers, collaborators, simply refugees. Many of them were in no hurry to go back to their homeland. In response, the Soviet government launched an operation that Western historians later called Operation Keel Haul. The term comes from an old naval punishment, keel hauling, where a sailor was dragged under a ship's keel by a rope. Few survived the ordeal. The name proved chillingly fitting. The Soviet Union faced a desperate need for labor to rebuild its shattered economy. So it set out to bring back not only its own citizens, but anyone it could reach. Former subjects of the Russian Empire, white émigrés, and even their children. Those born abroad who had never seen the so-called motherland. What made it even more chilling was the active cooperation of the Western allies. On one hand, they didn't want to jeopardize fragile diplomatic ties with Moscow. On the other, they coldly recognized how expensive it was to keep millions of people in displaced persons camps. It was easier to hand them over. 4 million people were hauled home by trains and trucks. But the motherland didn't greet them with open arms. Instead, they faced filtration camps and harsh reassignment. For many, this return was a one-way ticket, to the gulag or the execution wall. No legal work, denied housing rentals, bank doors shut tight, barred from buying a phone SIM card. This isn't a nightmare, it's the harsh reality faced by people without citizenship. They go by the name stateless persons, from the Greek apolis, meaning without a city, without a country. Invisible people dropped out of the system. Officially, there are 4.5 million of them, but in truth, the number is far greater. They exist in the physical world, yet on paper, they don't exist at all. In Kuwait and its neighboring countries, entire communities live who are called Bedouins. Don't confuse them with Bedouins. The term Bedoun comes from the Arabic phrase meaning without citizenship. These people descend from desert nomads who, in the mid-20th century, either missed or simply chose not to register as citizens when new borders were drawn. For decades, they lived in their own country like ghosts. Then Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates came up with what they thought was a clever solution. Instead of granting citizenship to the Bedouins, they started buying passports for them from the Comoros Islands, one of Africa's poorest nations. After that, they deported the Bedouins to this new homeland. a place many had never even set foot in. Sometimes, lacking citizenship leads to surprising paradoxes. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Latvia and Estonia faced a challenge: hundreds of thousands of Russian-speaking residents without clear citizenship. They came up with a unique solution: the non-citizen passport. In English, it's called an alien's passport, like the holder arrived from another planet. Within the country, it offered fewer rights than a regular citizen's passport, but with it, people could travel freely across both the Schengen area and Russia, something their national passports didn't allow. It was a ticket to two worlds at once. Today, international law has changed to reduce cases like this. Countries that traditionally base citizenship on descent now must grant passports to anyone born on their soil, when otherwise those individuals would become stateless. It's a safety net, protecting people from falling through the cracks. The idea of a document that transcended national borders captured imaginations throughout the 20th century. It even led to the creation of the World Citizen's Passport. This was a real document, 42 pages long, complete with spaces for visas and stamps. It was invented by Harry Davis, an American pilot and actor who, back in 1948, renounced his citizenship in the United States and declared himself the first world citizen in history. A noble gesture, but unfortunately it proved almost useless. Only 6 countries recognized this World Citizen's Passport, places like Zambia and Tanzania. But history also holds a different kind of passport, one issued not by any single nation but by an international organization and accepted by 50 countries at once. This passport appeared over 100 years ago, and it was created by perhaps the most noble figure of the 20th century, the Norwegian polar explorer, scientist, and humanitarian Fridtjof Nansen. After the First World War, the world changed beyond recognition. 2 great empires collapsed at once, the Russian and the Ottoman. Europe became flooded with millions of refugees carrying documents from countries that no longer existed on the map. They were stateless. Then, Fridtjof Nansen, leveraging his immense influence, convinced the League of Nations, the predecessor to the United Nations, to issue these people their own form of identification. It was called the Nansen Passport. The first to receive it were Russian émigrés. Among them were Ivan Bunin, Vladimir Nabokov, Ilya Repin, and Marc Chagall. This simple piece of paper bearing a photograph and the League of Nations seal did more than help them survive. It allowed them to keep working, creating, and share their greatest works with the world. Later, 300,000 Armenians fleeing genocide received the Nansen Passport. For them, it became a ticket to a new life. Fridtjof Nansen's story proves that even in the darkest times, humanity can show compassion. To connect with that legacy, to complete our journey, we headed to a place without countries, borders, or passports. The only continent like that on Earth. To find themselves on the only continent without countries or borders. Yes, friends, 2.5 years after our episode on the North Pole, we've finally reached Antarctica. There are no border guards here, no visa offices, no flags dividing the icy plains into yours and mine. And right here, standing before a mountain named after Fridtjof Nansen, the man who saved stateless people, I want to bring everything together. This long investigation, the stories about spies, pharaohs, taxes, and lotteries, has brought us to a simple yet not obvious conclusion. There are no good or bad passports. Instead, there's a complex and cunning web of international law, layered with the powerful inertia of history. The strength of your passport doesn't reflect the level of democracy in your country. It doesn't measure its wealth or security. It's simply the result of hundreds of diplomatic handshakes, economic deals, and old grudges. What seems like an unshakable system is really just a habit, a vast global habit, and habits can change. And they are changing right before our eyes. The world is becoming more connected than ever. Today's nomads aren't desert Bedouins. They're digital nomads working from anywhere on the planet. Programmers, designers, writers who need only a laptop and a reliable internet connection to live. Their identity ties less to where they were born and more to their lifestyle, profession, and global community. Where will this lead us? We might never see a single world government or one global citizenship, but I can easily imagine something like an Apple Passport or a Yandex Passport. A document that proves your reputation not within a country, but inside a vast digital ecosystem. It could turn out that, to rent an apartment in Singapore or get a loan in Berlin, your standing in this system matters more than the eagle embossed on your national passport's cover. We began our journey with the metaphor of a train, a ticket handed to each of us the moment we are born. We explored how these tickets came to be, why some grant a seat inside the cabin while others leave you clinging to the roof. We realized the rules of this game are complex, tangled, and often unfair. But the most important thing to remember is this: none of us chose our ticket. It was simply given to us. So don't judge a person by the color of the ticket they drew in life's great lottery.